Yesterday, we discussed an article that has been getting some attention online, mainly because feminists seem to really like it. The article was written by a woman who complains about all the cooking that she did during her marriage. And she would cook while her husband was at work, and it became very traumatizing for her to have to do all this cooking because she decided that she didn't find it exciting anymore. It wasn't fulfilling. So she boycotted and said, I'm not going to cook anymore. Then her marriage fell apart, and now she has vowed to never cook a meal for another man ever again. The whole thing was a very bitter, very angry, very self-centered, melodramatic diatribe. Well, I got a few emails in response to that discussion. I wanted to share one email that came in. This is from Catherine. She says, Matt, your podcast today was very offensive to me. The woman you mocked had legitimate concerns. One of the reasons my own marriage fell apart is because I was expected to do all the cooking and all the cleaning. Women are tired of that. Feminism doesn't hurt a marriage. You can't have a healthy marriage without feminism. Marriages last if they are equal, all caps, period, all caps. Okay, so you can't have a healthy marriage without feminism. And I had other emails that echoed basically that same sentiment. And first of all, listen, I don't mean to be cruel or anything like that. But I do wonder how someone who is divorced can make pronouncements about what constitutes a healthy marriage. I find this a lot. Whenever I talk about marriage, there are people who they'll begin by admitting that they've been divorced at least once, and then they'll go on to talk about and give all their wisdom on what makes a good, healthy marriage, and so on and so forth. I mean, is it possible that you might have some faulty ideas about marriage, and perhaps that's something that fed into the fact that you're no longer married? I mean, isn't that something that certainly is something that you should maybe look into? I don't know, but I do think that the opposite is the case here. Feminism is not essential to a healthy marriage. Feminism destroys marriage. Not just feminism, by the way, but any ism whatsoever. Marriage is not a place for isms. You can't go into a marriage with some kind of political or ideological system as your guiding principle in the marriage itself. I'm not saying that you can't have a political or ideological system and be married. I'm saying that system cannot be what makes your marriage function. So even though I'm a conservative, I would never say, well, you can't have a healthy marriage without conservatism. No, marriage really has nothing to do with the conservative political ideology, or at least it's only connected in a very secondary sort of way. Marriage depends on the love and devotion that both spouses have towards each other. That's what makes a healthy marriage. That's really it. If you try to filter that love and devotion through an ideology, especially an ideology like feminism, you're going to be in trouble because it complicates things, it dilutes things, it throws your priorities all out of whack. So I have found that maintaining a successful marriage is extremely simple. Now, I won't say it's easy all the time, and I certainly won't say that I personally have come anywhere close to mastering the art of maintaining, of mastering the art of marriage, I suppose. I'm no expert or guru, but I do know that it's simple. There are a lot of things that we can tell the answer is simple, even if it's hard sometimes to do. So it's simple with marriage. It's not complicated. You love the other person, be willing to sacrifice for them, make their needs and their desires a priority to you. And that's kind of it. I think if you do that, you'll be fine. You'll be able to get through any challenge if you do that. And then here's the other thing. This is part of that, but you have to serve your spouse without keeping score. And this is where feminism really screws things up, I think. It's with the scorekeeping. Because once you get into the scorekeeping, you're in trouble. There has never been a healthy or good or joyful marriage in history with a scoreboard. Anytime there's a scoreboard in a marriage, that once you notice that there's a scoreboard like hanging in your living room, at least a metaphorical scoreboard. Once you notice that, you got to go to the marriage counselor because you're in trouble. Good marriages don't have scoreboards. Competitiveness destroys a marriage. At least a certain kind of competitiveness. My wife and I are competitive in other kinds of ways. Like we're competitive when it comes to board games, and I'm way better at those. We're competitive about who's the better driver. I am by a mile. We're competitive about parallel parking. Again, I'm better at that. We're competitive about who can guess the ending of TV shows and movies. Anytime we're watching a TV show or a movie, you know, who can guess what the twists are going to be and everything. Once again, I nail it almost every single time, so I'm better there as well. But there's that kind. I think that kind of competitiveness is okay, although it can get a bit intense at times. I'm not going to lie. I mean, my wife and I have probably gone to bed angry at each other on more than a few occasions because of board games. So that has happened. But I think the really bad kinds of competitions are the competitions over who works the hardest, who does more around the house, who did this, who did that. The competitiveness that disguises itself as a desire for equality. That's the stuff that kills the marriage. And that's what feminism brings into the marriage. And that's why it is lethal to a marriage. And you notice something about that. Whenever somebody complains or says that they want equality in their marriage, it always, have you noticed this? When someone says, oh, I just want my marriage to be equal. When they say that, it always involves them doing less and the other person doing more. Have you noticed that? So someone will say, I want things to be equal. And what they mean is, I want my spouse to do the dishes more often or whatever. You never hear anyone say, I want things to be equal, so I'll do the dishes. That never happens. So this desire for equality, this scorekeeping, it's always self-serving. Anytime someone in a marriage checks the scoreboard, they're always going to discover that they're ahead. In that they've done more around the house, so now they get to kick back and let their spouse catch up. That's what's really fascinating, is that anytime you look at the scoreboard, you're always going to be ahead. That's the problem with the scoreboard. The woman who sent the email, Catherine, she says that in her former marriage, she was expected to do all the cooking and all the cleaning. And so the question is, what did her husband do? Maybe he did nothing. Maybe he was a worthless, useless oaf. It's possible. There are people like that in marriages. Who knows? But oftentimes you find that when one spouse is going on about, I always am the one who does this, whatever this is, very often there are a million other things that the other person always does on their own. So I think this attitude just doesn't work. A marriage can't work this way. It can only work if your first priority is to serve your spouse and your family. But again, this is the problem with feminism. Feminism wants nothing to do with that. Feminism doesn't want a woman to serve her husband and her children. You're never going to hear a feminist say that. You're never going to hear a feminist say, talk about serving their husband, to a feminist, the idea of serving anyone, especially a man, is repulsive. And that's why it doesn't work in a marriage, because that's what marriage is. They say, oh, I can't serve, that's demeaning, that's degrading, that's belittling. Well, if you can't serve, if you don't want to serve someone, then don't get married. If you're a woman, you're not interested in serving your husband, then don't get married. It's not for you. And if you're a man and you're not interested in serving your wife, then don't get married. You're not man enough for marriage. You're not strong enough. You're not mature enough if you're not interested in serving, because that's what marriage is.